it's all about balance. And part of being a good leader of people is recognizing when maybe you need to pull it back a little, or to rein everyone in, or focus on maybe if there's one person that might be having an issue. And it could even be related to an earbuds or music, but maybe there are other distractions in the department. And I think being tuned in and tapped in with your team is the most important takeaway.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, Clean Freaks, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Clean podcast, Season 29, Planet Assembly. I'm your host, Bobby Parker, and on today's episode, titled Tunes in the Trenches, we're going to crack open the hornet's nest of the argument around music in the sterile processing department. Have you ever been in an SPD where everybody was aligned on how music should be handled? Who gets to pick the radio station, whether we have music at all, whether or not it's wise to be listening to music in earbuds, one earbud or two, inside of the department or outside. There's definitely a lot of considerations to be had here, both from a safety perspective and from an infection prevention perspective and from an efficiency perspective, but also, as we're going to uncover here shortly, from a cultural perspective. How do we create that environment at work where people want to be there, where they're passionate about their job, and is music an essential part of creating that? To answer that question, I've brought two sterile processing leaders who are on opposite sides of this issue to talk to us about the reasons for why they made the decision they made in their department. And hopefully it'll help you as you reflect on what's the right thing to do for yours. So after this short break, we will be right back with our music experts.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, the time is now here. Joining me now in studio are our two sides of this. We'll call it a friendly debate today. We brought Elizabeth Bell, the SPD manager at a department out in Phoenix, Arizona, and Tracy Raymond, the operations coordinator at Instrumentum. Both of these gals are on our Beyond Clean advisory group and have participated in some lively discussion there about this topic. And I'm excited to bring that discussion live here on the show with all of you. So Elizabeth, Tracy, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Hi. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into this, I want to give you an opportunity to let the audience be familiar with you and what you've been doing in sterile processing. So why don't you give us a brief introduction each? And Elizabeth, I'll let you go first.
Hi, I have been in the field 17 years, so quite a long time. I started as a sterile processing technician with no experience, and I am now a manager of a department and enjoying it and loving it. And, as my perceptions and my thoughts have changed over the years, it's kind of fun to look back and see how we grow as leaders and when we're making these types of decisions in the department.
Yeah, I love that. You're so right. My thoughts, even in the last couple of years, having been out of sterile processing, have changed on a number of factors. And Tracy and I were just talking about this as well. Like if you could go back with the knowledge you have today to like a former version of yourself, how you would have led differently or thought about things differently. So that's great. Thanks for bringing your experience today. Tracy, what about you?
So I'm Tracy Raymond. I've been in the field for 30 years. Started similar to Elizabeth, tech, not really knowing anything. Worked my way up through the ranks, so to speak. Worked in and around the OR and currently am at Instrumentum as operations coordinator. To your point, yes, there's many things that I know now that I wish I would have known when I led my first department.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, it sounds like all three of our stories are similar in some way. I also found sterile processing without any prior experience, not really knowing what it was. I remember in my orientation week asking my preceptor what OR stands for. I'd heard of an ER, never heard of an OR, but here I was processing surgical instruments. So it is funny how this career field tends to find us, and then it's really sticky. You learn to love it and grow, and both of your careers are a great testament to what a great career opportunity there is here in the sterile processing profession. Now, as we say on almost every week at the end of the show, how the time has flown by, I fully expect that the time is going to fly really fast with all of the perspectives that there are to be shared today. So we're going to skip more of the lighthearted intro and jump right into the topic here. On this episode about Planet Assembly, our season's topic, as we're talking about the prep and pack area, I want to do something a little bit different and talk about the cultural center of the prep and pack station. And most departments that I've been in, the source of both much joy and much conflict, and that is the radio or the Pandora station or whatever it is that happens in your department. And I just want to ask at the outset here for a hot take, what has been your experience with music being played in the sterile processing department throughout your career? Maybe not even in the department you're in today. Has it been largely positive or largely a source of distraction and contention? Tracy, I'll let you take it first.
All right. Well, unfortunately, the music in the department, in my past experience, has been a source of contention. Whether it's people arguing over what station it's on, or the volume that it is, or maybe doing things to music in the department that takes away from the actual work, that type of thing.
You don't say. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Dancing,
We had a Latin dancer in our department too, when the Latin music came on, he just had to move his feet. So yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah, I hear you. And that's been pretty consistent throughout the different places that you've been of seeing more pain than positive out of music in the department.
Unfortunately it has, I would be convinced to bring music back, and that would be good for about a week, and then we'd go right back into the same pattern type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Elizabeth, I'm curious about your perspective and how your experience with it may be similar or different.
My experience started out similar. So years ago, and as a leader for a long time, I had a pretty steady stance on, no music in the department, because it was a source of contention, especially between the different types of music. And, with technology, advances in technology, there's even more available for people to listen to now, because it's not just music, it's also podcasts and YouTube videos and all kinds of things. And, I went through some really hard things as a leader a couple of years ago, and I rejoined the ranks as a frontline technician 2 years ago. So after having spent, almost a decade in leadership, I was frontline staff again. And one thing that I noticed was that, it was super quiet. We were all focused on our work, but there was just something missing. And I think it was music. And, there was just it was just something that just kept us going. It gets kind of monotonous tasks, especially if you have a lot of staff in the department. And so you don't have to switch your responsibilities a lot, if you're just focused on one thing. And I noticed that, when I was able to listen to music, it really helped me get through my shift. It helped me stay focused. It just helped me stay grounded. Sometimes I would listen to meditation music, like a calming type of music. And so when I became a leader again, and my team came to me and said, hey, we would really like to use our earbuds, because they also don't all agree on the same types of music. So they were trying to find a common ground. And I said, you know what? Let's look at this. Let's look at this objectively and not use any past experiences. and let's see if we can be successful at this. And that is where the story started.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that perspective. It is interesting what it's like going from being a leader to working on the front lines in another leader's department, and maybe how that could change your perspective. And sometimes we forget what it's like to be a technician. I do know right at the center of what happens in assembly, that culture piece of how we relate to one another and how we enjoy our work is really important. We want our workspaces to be that kind of safe third space for people, that third place, the kind of coffee shop environment where people have kind of a home away from home. I think often of the Seattle fish markets and like the guys who are throwing the big fish around to one another and laughing and yelling and having a good time while there are customers there enjoying it. Like I would really aspire to lead that kind of department and admire participating in that kind of environment where people collaborate and are able to safely and efficiently have fun at work. And so I could see how music could definitely be a central part of that. I guess my follow-up question, because I think all three of us would nod our head in agreement that is a net positive thing to have that kind of team environment in the department. Is music a central part or an essential part of building that kind of culture in your team in the assembly area? What do you think?
That's a good question. My first gut reaction is, it's not a bad idea, but my other gut reaction is they need to just talk to each other, I guess, because without the music, people tend to talk more, I think, where they can talk more about, they get to know each other more. So you're building more of that teamwork, not that they have to know the ins and outs of your entire life, right? But I think it forms some sort of bond as well with them being able to talk about, their children or what they're doing this upcoming weekend, that type of stuff. That also, I think, plays a very important role in building that teamwork culture.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I learned that from experience, what you're describing, Tracy, and the first department that I worked in that did not have a television in the break room. Because I was so accustomed to like everybody sits down, opens their lunch. It's 12 o'clock. We watch The Price is Right. That's what we do in this department. Like it or not, that's what we're going to watch. And everybody would enjoy it, laugh, talk about that. And then I joined a department that didn't have one. And the technicians grumbled about it and I grumbled about it. But I did find that the kinds of break room conversations that we had went a lot deeper for those who wanted to share that. Obviously, not everybody wants to talk about their personal experiences in their home life at work, but did build some deep friendships there. So I'll add one to the scorecard there for you. I do think that there is some value in eliminating distractions, and that doesn't necessarily cut the legs out from people's enjoyment at work. What about you, Elizabeth? You described that feeling of it being a little bit too quiet and almost a little cold or sterile in the assembly area without music. In what ways do you think that music is a central part of building that kind of team culture?
I really think it depends on the team. And, what I found is a lot of our team members want autonomy. So they want to have a choice. They want to have a say in things. They want to feel like that their opinion matters and that it counts. And so not everyone in our department uses them. So I would say maybe half or less actually uses one earbud when they choose to, and the rest are visiting and talking, and sometimes a little too much, to be honest. I'll walk through and be like, hey guys, we can talk, but we got to keep working while we're talking, because production is important. And that's why I think balance is key. It's all about balance. And part of being a good leader of people is recognizing when maybe you need to pull it back a little, or to rein everyone in, or focus on maybe if there's one person that might be having an issue, and it could even be related to an earbuds or music, but maybe there are other distractions in the department. And I think being tuned in and tapped in with your team is the most important takeaway when it comes to the culture in the department.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the challenge that often comes up with this one issue, because there are so many preferences, because there are opportunities with abuses, particularly with the earbud policy and like, what's being listened to? Are people tempted to like switch to YouTube or like video calls or things when the manager's not around? Like there's a lot of temptations to look at those handful of abuses and to make a broad category change. And as a technician, I felt frustrated by some of those leadership decisions where, when one person in the department's really struggling using this privilege, well, that it gets taken away from everybody. And so, yeah, I can empathize with that. As we're thinking practically about this issue and what the options are for departments out there to use it, I generally see three different frameworks. There's the no music anywhere of any kind, just to keep people focused on their work policy. On the other end, there's everybody gets to pick their own music. So earbuds and personal devices are okay in the assembly area. And then the common middle ground that I sometimes see of people who want to provide music, but they don't necessarily want people's personal devices out. They'll have one kind of central radio that plays for everybody. And that comes with its own set of problems, but you have to establish both the volume and the style of music and aim for kind of that department store vibe of like, you can gently hear some music playing in the background, but it's not necessarily the central piece. As we were talking about those different things on the Beyond Clean advisory group, and forgive me if I didn't do a good enough job positioning this at the beginning of the episode, but Elizabeth and Tracy have not met before this conversation, you all. This is a fresh conversation that's happening over the Beyond Clean advisory group where we're talking through how do we navigate those different options? And I wanted to bring you all because you've got, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of what you're doing in your department today. So could you give us a little bit more visibility into what it looked like for how you arrived at the particular policy that you're using today? And what are some of the benefits that you've seen from it after you've made that change?
So the team came to me at Huddle and they decided that they were going to, as a group, discuss the use of earbuds in the department. And, I'm very familiar that, AME SD 79 says that cell phones should not be allowed in prep and pack. And we all know why. But a really important point that my team made was that, we use handheld scanners for our tracking systems that look just like a phone. We use the Zebra communication devices to communicate with one another while we're at work. All of these things that kind of contradict my point that cell phones shouldn't be in the department because I'm allowing all these other devices in the department. And so we decided we were going to develop a process for cleaning those devices and ensuring that we had electronic wipes that we could use to disinfect those with. And, we went around and I ATP tested a lot of things. So to kind of to make some points, let's make some points. Let's look at this. Let's study this. And we tested the keyboard, a toilet seat, a cell phone, the workstation, you name it. We were testing everything. And you know what the highest ATP amount came back? You know what item that was? It was our keyboards at our workstations. And so that was a big eye opener for me because, it's kind of like they were calling my bluff, they were proving a point to me. And so that's when I began to think, okay, so we actually have some evidence here that this isn't we could make a policy that ensures that this isn't dangerous for our team and for our packaging methods and for microorganisms. And so we also developed a process for routine testing of the devices, and that gets entered into our tracking system that kind of shows, if it comes up in a survey or something, hey, I see you have a device, which cell phones have to remain in their pockets. We don't use them in the department. They don't talk or text or scroll or, we have a really specific standard operating procedures. But if it ever came up, because we are using these other devices as well, we have data to show that what we are doing is safe and monitored. And I think that's really important when making a decision like this, because we kind of thought outside of the box a little bit.
Yeah, you definitely went further than I originally imagined, because usually it's, they're not that big of a deal, or the department that says that, okay, we'll provide the wipes and ask people to wipe their devices off, but then you don't ever really see that happening. And so to create a quality process of, we're going to monitor that the wiping is happening, and we're going to verify that occasionally with the use of ATP tests to confirm that we are doing a safe thing, I think speaks volumes to making sure that we're not introducing a patient safety risk, just for a preference over music. So yeah, I would applaud you for taking that really seriously and intentionally. I always thought in comparing the devices things like the Zebra scanners and the keyboards, like we use them a lot in the area, but we don't take them with us to the bathroom. We don't take them to our house. And so that's often the argument for why we wouldn't want that personal cell phone in the area. But yeah, if you're being thoughtful about how you manage it and that you write a policy to speak to a surveyor, I think that does answer a lot of the general concerns. Tracy, I'm curious, did you have any follow-up questions about what Elizabeth's process looks like or how she came to that?
I'm very impressed by the links that she went to ensure, that there's nothing on a cell phone, right, that could impact our departments. And I'm actually a little shocked that your keyboards were the worst. I mean, I knew they'd be bad, but I figured the cell phone would probably, because everyone takes their cell phone into the bathroom nowadays. So definitely.
Now my cell phone was the worst.
Okay. It doesn't
Mine was the worst out of everyone's.
Yeah.
I am curious, though, your success rate, I guess, for the policy of ensuring that they're cleaning them, right? And that type of thing. Like, have you had a chance to get the data behind to ensure that, okay, they're doing what they're supposed to do? It's reminds me somewhat of like the hand washing, right? We all know how to wash our hands, but are you always doing it the right way every time type of thing?
Right. And, I've seen the ATP testing be used in some facilities to monitor hand hygiene compliance. And that is where I came up with the idea to maybe look at our devices was based on the hand hygiene compliance. So you make an excellent point. But, there's still this underlying, it's a spot check, right? So we really don't know at all times. So there is still, it is still questionable in some ways. And so no process that we put in place is set in stone, here. And so if we were to notice anything negative or notice things weren't being wiped down when doing these spot checks and this monitoring, then we would have to look at changing our process. But when we implemented it, everyone was knowledgeable and informed and knew what to expect, and that it could change someday based on, what about our tray defect data and things like that. And, so we monitor that with our quality management system too. And 10 months ago, when we started this process, our average was 27 defects per month. And we do about 7,500, we sterilize 7,500 products a month. So, which 27 was still lower, but it's higher than what we wanted, right? So what I wanted to see is if we noticed it increasing when we all started allowing, earbuds in the department. And what I found is it steadily decreased. And so for May, we had 5 defects reported for a little over 7,500 products sterilized, and 2 of those were holes. So truly, we had 3 truly preventable tray errors that were made. And the funny thing is they were not made by those that choose to wear an earbud. So I thought that was a really great thing. I changed my own mind about how I look at this process just based on all of the data we have been accumulating for we have 10 months worth now.
Wow. I want to dig more into that data as well, but I also, Tracy, want to hear your experience because you alluded to the fact that you flip-flopped a couple of times on this, or maybe tried it for a little while and then had to reel it back in. So how did you arrive at the policy that you're working with today?
So with the current policy that's been in place for the last 3 or 4 years is no music, no earbuds. Because of our focused goal from senior leadership and down of, this quest for 0 defects, which granted, every SPD has that goal, right? But because we're offsite and facilities pay us to, deliver them products that are defect free. We really need to ensure that everything is taken out of the mix that could increase the chances of having a defect. So we decided that given a lot of our past experiences, of the issues of music and maybe some lack of attention due to listening to music, or lack of attention because they have an earbud in and they're so in tuned with themselves, they don't hear anything outside of themselves. We needed to take out any possibility of a defect that occurs, to make sure that our clients get what they need. So that's kind of why we decided to forego music and earbuds. The team has come up and asked about it, and we're like, well, we need to look at data, right? We need to ensure that our data is good. So we have promised them that we will continue to look at data, and if things are going the right way, we may decide to relook at it.
Yeah. I remember a facility tour that I took one time as an SPD manager, evaluating a scope repair facility that we were considering using for flexible endoscopes. And when I did the on-site tour there on their scope repair floor, they didn't have any music going, just 20 to 30 repair professionals, seasoned with tons of experience, working under my microscope, and just the sound of tools working. It was startling to me just because I wasn't used to that or accustomed to that. And I spoke to a couple of people about it, and everyone I spoke to wanted it that way. Like, they were very focused on their work because they were doing, micro soldering and very attention to detail oriented type tasks. And yeah, they just took their work very seriously. And I came away from that with an impression of people aligned on a mission for patient safety, that they all kind of acknowledged that the music had the potential to be a distraction. At the same time, I acknowledged that I don't think that the technicians in the department I was leading at the time would have been on board with that kind of working environment. And so it is something to think about and consider. All right. Well, we've kind of laid the groundwork for the two different arguments for music in the prep and pack area. I'm curious, just a little thought experiment here, Tracy and Elizabeth, if you two were co-leaders in a new department next month, you moved to a new city and ended up as, two leaders starting at the same time. Or, if you'd rather hypothetically talk about, two leaders not named Tracy and Elizabeth starting in a department, how would you come together and find common ground on this issue? Is this something that we really need to stake our culture on, to draw a line in the sand on? Is this the hill to die on, or is this something that we should be flexible about as we work with other leaders?
I would think that we need to be flexible because not every team is the same, right? I mean, granted, unfortunately, I feel like every team I've been a part of has had someone or a few people that have derailed it and made me go back to the no music, right? But I think we need to be open-minded, discuss with each other, and really, we have so much at our hands right now that we can do what she talked about, right? The testing, the quality surveillance. So there could be a potential really good middle ground for two different leaders to come together on.
And I would have to agree, I feel that the best decisions are those that we make as a team, right? So whatever works best for the team, I feel like is the best in that environment or that department, that situation. So, and I'm working together and, like she said, being flexible, having an open mind, and sometimes having to change things along the way, but it's the nature of what we do. And so I think that we've made it a long way in our industry that we're even having this discussion here today, and that it is celebrated in a way. We can have different opinions about things and different experiences. And at the end of the discussion, we're on the same team, we're on the same side, and we support one another. And that's what it's all about.
I love that. And that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here. So thanks for being a part of that, Tracy and Elizabeth. I appreciate it. I imagine as people listen to this episode, there are going to be some technicians out there who just got some ammunition for going to their leader and asking for music. Or there's a leader out there who's frustrated about music and just got some more thoughts and reasons for why today's the day the music needs to stop. And these teams are going to start having these conversations. Now, both of you alluded to the fact that we need to collect the data and be thoughtful and intentional about how we make this decision. So where would you recommend a department starts who's going to begin this journey of looking at the data to come up with whether or not we should or should not be using music in the department in the prep and pack area?
So I think my first thing would be to determine what your current defect rate is, right? And then I think it's a great idea to use the ATP and those type of things that you could use. You can test some things and have the discussion with the team, and find out pros and cons and, all that good stuff.
What about you, Elizabeth? Where would you recommend that departments start as they begin looking at the data and starting this conversation?
I agree with everything that Tracy said, and I think looking at your defect rate. Something else that I've noticed that's really important, and maybe is that what makes a difference in my current department, is the team itself and the culture within the team. So we have a very wide range of experience. So we have some that have been here for over 30 years, and then we have technicians that are within their first year in the field. And so I think all of that, if it was an entire department of students fresh out of school, I don't know that the distraction, would be worth it. So you really have to look at the experience level, the team, and then, and the data, as Tracy said, and then come to a decision based on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And all of the decisions need to be motivated for what's best for the patient, right? So if utilizing music is going to help establish a culture where people want to stay, build relationships, grow in the department, work more efficiently, more effectively with a lower defect rate, then that's a tool that should be used and help support that culture. But we certainly don't want to introduce something that's going to become a risk to the patient. So yeah, I appreciate those sentiments. As I promised, the time has indeed flown by, and there's a lot of things that we didn't get to talk about yet. And so that we're just going to have to save it for another day. Namely, what have you seen about music? We talked about the quality piece of it, but the efficiency side of it as well. There's, lots of arguments about I work faster while I'm talking or while I'm dancing. And other people say, there's no way that person's working because all they do is dance and talk and get distracted. So maybe more data points to look at as you consider this is the efficiency side of it, because we got to make sure that the trays are right, but we also have to make sure that they get done as well. Ladies, that's going to do it for our interview today. Thank you so much for your grace, your humility, your bravery, and wanting to talk about this issue. I think it's an important one as we consider the assembly station, and hopefully a fun one for the listeners as they take a look at their own department. So thanks again for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
All right, that was Elizabeth Bell and Tracy Raymond talking to us about the cultural significance of music in the prep and pack area of your department. I have experienced the whole spectrum of policies on this, both as a technician, as a supervisor, as a department manager, and then going into departments as a consultant. And I will say that there are no two departments who agree on this. There are a lot of considerations that we didn't even get to. One of the common ones that comes up with the earbud policy is how that interacts with and conflicts with the policies in other departments. So maybe the sterile processing technician is one who has to leave the department to make deliveries to the OR. What about when they're walking through that public space or entering the OR where perhaps earbuds are not allowed? Do we have a policy where they're allowed only in the prep and pack area, but they come out whenever you leave the area? Certainly some complexities to consider. And then if you do the one radio station, who gets to pick the music? Do you really subject the person who can't stand country music to another day of Willie Nelson at work? It's just something that you have to think about and consider. And then that last conversation about efficiency. people on both sides of the aisle on this one, and it reminds me of the conversation around chairs and seating in sterile processing. As a leader, I was firmly in the camp for a while of the no seating for sterile processing technicians because we want to be serious about our work. We want to be focused. We want to be efficient with how we move through trays. But I've seen some pretty compelling data out there from the ergonomics folks, both about the strain on the body as well as the efficiency with which we move through sterile processing if we think about it carefully. So I think the biggest takeaway here today is let's be thoughtful about the data. Let's not let our prior experiences, whether good or bad, color what we're going to do in our department today. But let's make a decision that's based on data, best practice, policy, patient safety, and move forward from there. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed something a little different as we brought a debate for you today here on the show. And we'll remind you, as we always do here at Beyond Clean, until we talk to you next time, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.